Soleil was 5 years old. She was sitting on the kitchen floor with her sketchbook when she said it. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way she said everything that mattered, quietly, directly, with the complete certainty of someone who had already decided the words were true before releasing them. Her mama was at the counter. Min Yi was in the living room, jacket off, phone in hand, the specific relaxed quality of a man who had stopped performing in this apartment months ago. Everything was ordinary. Everything was warm. And then Soleil looked up from her drawing. She looked at her mama's back. She said, "Mama." Zara turned. "Don't let him go." The kitchen was completely quiet. Zara looked at her daughter. Min Yi had not heard. His phone call was still happening in the living room, his voice low and even, completely unaware. Zara crouched to Soleil's level. "What do you mean, baby?" Soleil looked at her sketchbook. She turned it. On the page was a drawing. A woman. Not Zara. A different woman. Standing in a doorway Soleil had never been through. Holding something in her hands. And in the corner of the drawing, in the specific way Soleil drew things that were happening rather than things that had already happened. The woman was smiling, but her eyes were not. Zara looked at the drawing. She looked at her daughter. "Who is this?" Soleil picked up her orange crayon. She went back to drawing. "The one who wants what you have." "Before I take you back to the beginning, before I tell you who this woman is and what she has been doing and how long she has been doing it, and what a 5-year-old saw that every adult in that building missed. Subscribe right now if you are new here. Drop your city and the time it is where you are in the comments. Because what happens when Soleil says that name out loud in front of everyone is going to stop your heart completely. Stay with me. Zara Williams had not been looking for anything when Min Yi arrived in her life. That was the thing about the real ones. They did not arrive when you were looking. They arrived on a Tuesday in October when you were carrying 3 grocery bags and a 5-year-old on your hip, and your keys had fallen to the bottom of your bag, and the elevator in your building was out again, and you were calculating whether you had the energy to climb 6 floors or whether this was the moment you simply sat on the lobby floor and accepted your circumstances. She had chosen the stairs. She had not chosen the man who appeared at the 2nd floor landing going down while she was going up. He was Korean, late 30s, expensive coat that he was wearing like he had forgotten it was expensive, the look of someone whose mind was somewhere else entirely. He saw her before she saw him. 3 bags, a child, a bag that was clearly eating her keys. He took 2 of the grocery bags without asking. She almost objected. Then Soleil looked at him. Soleil had been doing the specific thing she did with strangers, the 4-second assessment, the tilt of the head, the decision that happened entirely in her eyes before she said anything. She said, "You have sad hands." The man stopped walking. He looked at his hands. He looked at this child. "What does that mean?" Soleil put her head back on her mother's shoulder. "It means you do things for people, but nobody does things back." Zara closed her eyes briefly. "I am so sorry." "She's right." He said it so simply that Zara stopped apologizing. He looked at her. "Which floor?" "6." He carried the bags to the 6th floor. He handed them back at the door. He did not ask for her name. He did not perform any of it. He just turned to leave. Soleil said, "We have soup." He stopped. He turned back. "Soleil," Zara started. "It's the good kind." Soleil was already pushing the apartment door open, Grandma's recipe. He looked at Zara. She looked at him. She thought about saying no. She thought about the 6 floors, the bags, the sad hands. She stepped back from the door. He came in. His name was Kang Min-yi. She found this out over soup at her kitchen table, while Soleil explained her current drawing project with the focused intensity of someone presenting a quarterly report. He listened to all of it. Not politely. Actually, the way he had listened to the sad hands comment on the stairwell. Like what Soleil said was worth the full space of his attention. Zara noticed. She noticed most things. She had been noticing things about people her whole life in the specific way of someone who had learned early that understanding the room was a survival skill. She noticed the way he held his soup spoon, the way he looked at Soleil's drawing when she held it up, the way he glanced at the door twice during dinner, not toward leaving, but toward something outside he had decided to let wait. She noticed that he did not check his phone once. She had dated men who checked their phones every 4 minutes. She had been with a man who checked his phone at the hospital when Soleil was born. She noticed. When he left at 9:30, he stood at the door for a moment. He said, "Thank you for the soup." Soleil said from somewhere in the apartment, "You can come back." He looked at Zara. She pressed her lips together against a smile. "She means it," Zara said. "She doesn't say things she doesn't mean." He looked at the door. He looked back. "Neither do I." He came back the following Tuesday. And the one after that. 3 months later, he was on the 6th floor more evenings than he was not. This had not been planned. Nothing about any of it had been planned. Zara had spent a long time building a life that was structured around what she could control. Her apartment, her work, her daughter. The 3 things she could account for. A Korean billionaire who carried grocery bags and listened to a 5-year-old's quarterly report on her drawing project and came back on Tuesdays had not been in any structure she had built. And yet, he fit. Not in the loud way. In the specific quiet way of something that had always been there and was only now being recognized. He knew how Soleil liked her eggs. He knew that Zara's back hurt on days she had stood at the clinic for more than 7 hours, and he had started leaving a specific pillow on the left side of the couch without commenting on it. He knew that Tuesdays were the hard day because Tuesdays were the day Zara's mother had died 4 years ago, and that Zara did not talk about this, but she moved differently on Tuesdays, and he had simply started being present on Tuesdays without making it a thing. Soleil drew him every week. Not the same drawing. Different versions. The version of him laughing at something she said. The version of him at the kitchen table with his hands around a coffee cup. The version of him standing at the window looking at the city with the expression she called his thinking face. She had shown Zara each one. Zara had looked at them all. She had filed them in the specific way she filed things that were becoming important. Carefully, without rushing what they meant. His name in the outside world was Kang Min-yi, chairman of Kang Industries' North American division, a man whose name appeared in financial press enough times that Zara had stopped being surprised by it. His name in the apartment on the 6th floor was just Min-yi. The man who sat on the kitchen floor with Soleil when she wanted to show him how she mixed colors. The man who had fixed the bathroom tap without being asked and had not mentioned it. The man who had looked at Zara one evening across the kitchen table and said, "I have not felt like this about a place in a very long time," and had meant the apartment, but had also meant something else entirely. She had looked at him. She had understood both things. She had not said it back yet. She was getting there. She was almost there. And then his assistant called. "Yuna Park had been Min Yi's personal assistant for 3 years. Zara had met her twice, both times at the Kang Industries offices when she had gone to meet Min Yi for lunch. Both times Yuna had been perfectly pleasant, professional, efficient, the kind of woman who managed 12 things simultaneously and made it look like 6. She had a specific smile, the kind that arrived at exactly the right moment and held for exactly the right duration. Zara had noticed it both times. She had not known what to do with what she noticed. She had filed it. Soleil had met Yuna once, briefly, in the lobby of the Kang Industries building when Min Yi had brought Soleil to see where he worked. A 3-minute interaction. Yuna had crouched to Soleil's level and said what a beautiful little girl with a warm voice and a warm smile. Soleil had looked at her. The 4-second assessment. The head tilt. She had not said anything. She had taken Min Yi's hand and looked at the lobby artwork. Min Yi had not noticed. Zara had noticed. She had filed it. She had told herself it was nothing. Children sometimes took time with new people. That was normal. Soleil took time with nobody. Soleil assessed everyone in 4 seconds and then said the true thing immediately. She had said nothing. Zara had filed this and not examined it for 3 weeks. The call came on a Wednesday evening. Min Yi was in the living room. Zara was at the kitchen counter making dinner. Soleil was on the kitchen floor with her sketchbook. The call lasted 4 minutes. Zara could hear Min Yi's voice changing in the specific way it changed when something was being handled rather than experienced. The work voice, the one that processed information and made decisions and kept emotion in a separate room. She heard him say it needs to wait until Monday. She heard him say, I understand that, but the answer is no. She heard the call end. She heard him stand. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. Zara looked at him. His expression was the specific arrangement of a man who had been managing something for longer than he wanted to and was deciding how much to say. Yuna. He said it the way you say the name of a problem you have been expecting. She wants to move the board meeting to Friday, a pause, for the 3rd time. Zara turned back to the stove. Why? She says the documentation isn't ready. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. From the floor, Soleil did not look up from her drawing. Her crayon moved in slow, deliberate circles. Is it ready? Zara asked. It's been ready for 2 weeks. Something tightened in Zara's chest. She did not show it. She turned the heat down on the stove. She said nothing. Min Yi came to the counter. He stood beside her. He looked at the pot. I'll handle it. I know you will. He looked at her. The specific look he gave her when he was checking that she was all right without asking directly, because she had told him once that being asked directly made her feel managed. She was all right. She was also filing something. From the floor, Soleil turned her sketchbook. She looked at the drawing she had made. She did not show it to anyone. She turned it back. She kept drawing. Drop a yellow heart in the comments right now if you have ever noticed something about someone that you filed away and didn't examine and wished later that you had looked sooner. Drop your city. Drop the time it is where you are. Because what Soleil has been drawing for 3 weeks is about to become the most important piece of paper in this story. Stay with me. The drawing on the kitchen floor that Wednesday evening was not the first. It was the 6th. Soleil had been drawing the same woman for 3 weeks. Not obsessively. Not in the way of a child fixating on something that frightened them. In the deliberate way she drew everything that she was trying to understand. She drew what she saw. She drew what she noticed. She drew until she understood what she was looking at. The woman in the drawings was always the same. Always in a doorway or a corridor. Always holding something. Documents in some drawings. A phone in others. And in every single drawing, without exception. The smile was perfect. The eyes were not. Soleil had not shown any of these drawings to her mama. She had not shown them to Min Yi. She was still drawing, still understanding. She was not ready to say anything yet. She would know when she was ready. She always knew. The Friday that Yuna had pushed the board, meeting to arrived with a cold, clear sky and the specific energy of a day that intended to be significant. Min Yi left early. Zara was at the clinic. Soleil was at school until 3. At 2:47, Yuna Park walked into the Kang Industries building with 2 coffees and a smile and a specific intention that she had been building toward for 11 months. She had been patient. Patient in the specific way of someone who understood that timing was everything. She had watched Min Yi change over the past year. She had watched the office version of him, controlled, precise, formidable, gradually show edges she had not seen before. A warmth in his voice on Tuesday evenings when he left early. A specific quality of attention he had after Wednesdays that she recognized immediately. A woman. She had known about Zara Williams for 8 months. She had been managing her response to this information for 8 months. Management was what Yuna did. She managed everything. She managed the calendar and the correspondence and the board meetings and the access and the information. She managed what Min Yi saw and when he saw it. She had been managing this for 3 years. What she had not managed was the feeling that had arrived 18 months ago when she had understood that Min Yi was the kind of man who happened once in a life. Not because of the company. Not because of the money. Because of the specific quality of him. The way he handled difficulty without noise. The way he saw things accurately and did not pretend otherwise. The way he was worth more than the position he occupied and did not know it and did not care, and that was precisely why he was worth more. She had seen this. She had decided. She had been patient. And now there was a woman on the 6th floor of a building in the Bronx who had not been looking for anything and had nevertheless arrived at exactly what Yuna had been working toward. Yuna took the elevator to the executive floor. She put Min Yi's coffee on his desk. She sat at her own desk. She opened the board documentation. Her smile was exactly right. Her eyes were not. At 3:15, Soleil came out of school. Aunt Donna picked her up on Fridays. They walked to Aunt Donna's building 2 blocks from the school. Soleil was quiet on the walk. Aunt Donna noticed. "What are you thinking about, baby?" Soleil looked at the pavement. Someone at Min Yi's work. Aunt Donna looked at her niece. "What about them?" Soleil thought for a moment. She smiles, but her face doesn't know about it. Aunt Donna slowed her walking slightly. "What does that mean?" Soleil looked up. When people really smile, their whole face does it, even the parts they don't notice. She looked back at the pavement. Her smile is the only part doing it. The rest of her face is doing something different. Aunt Donna was quiet for half a block. "Have you told your mama?" "Not yet." "Why?" Soleil stepped over a crack in the pavement. "Because I'm still drawing her. I draw until I understand what I'm looking at." They walked in silence for a moment. "And do you understand yet?" Aunt Donna asked. Soleil looked at the sky. Almost. She understood on a Saturday morning. Min Yi had arrived at the apartment at 10. He had brought the pastries from the bakery on Amsterdam Avenue that Soleil had decided were the correct pastries approximately 6 weeks ago, and he had remembered without being reminded. The morning was warm and ordinary and completely right. Soleil ate her pastry at the kitchen table. She watched Min Yi and her mama at the counter with the coffee. She watched the way they existed in the space together. The specific ease of two people who had stopped performing for each other. She watched Min Yi say something low that made her mama tilt her head back slightly with a laugh. She watched her mama's hand find his arm for a moment before moving away. She watched all of it. She looked at her sketchbook. She turned to the drawing she had been working on for 3 weeks. She looked at it, and she understood. The thing she had been trying to see for 3 weeks arrived completely and clearly the way understanding always arrived for Soleil. Not gradually, all at once, like a light being turned on in a room that had been dark for so long the furniture was invisible, until suddenly it wasn't. She put down her pastry. She looked at her mama's back. "Mama." Zara turned. "Don't let him go." The kitchen was very quiet. Min Yi was in the living room. Zara crouched to Soleil's level. She looked at the drawing. The woman in the doorway. The smile that was only in one part of the face. Something in her hands that Zara had not looked at closely until now. She looked closer. In the woman's hands in the drawing were papers. Documents. And on the documents, visible in the specific detail that Soleil put into everything she drew from observation. A name. Min Yi's name. And beside it on the document, in the drawing, another signature line. Already filled in. Zara looked at her daughter. "Baby," her voice was careful, "where did you see this?" Soleil pointed at the sketchbook. "I drew what I know." "But what did you actually see?" Soleil picked up her orange crayon. "The day Min Yi brought me to see his office, when the lady crouched down and said I was beautiful." Zara waited. "I saw what was on her screen." Soleil did not look up from the drawing. She didn't close it because she thought I couldn't read. "Silence." "Can you read it?" Zara said. "What was on the screen?" Soleil turned to a different page in the sketchbook. She had drawn the screen exactly as it had appeared 3 weeks ago, before she understood what it meant. Zara looked at the drawing of the screen. She felt the cold arrive slowly in her chest. Not panic. Something colder than panic. Understanding. The document on Yuna's screen 3 weeks ago had been a transfer authorization. Kang Industries, North American Division. Beneficial ownership to be transferred upon execution of. The rest was partially obscured in the drawing the way it had been partially obscured on the screen. But the date on the document was visible. Friday. Today. Zara stood up. She looked at the living room. Min Yi was on the couch, phone in hand, completely unaware. She looked at her daughter. Soleil was drawing again. Calm. Certain. Already having done what she needed to do. "You've been drawing this for 3 weeks, Zara said quietly. "I needed to understand it first. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Soleil looked up. "Because you needed to be ready to hear it." "Bestie, I need to stop here and ask you something before I continue. Drop your answer in the comments. If you were Zara right now, standing in your kitchen knowing your man is about to walk into a building where someone has been planning this for months, do you call him? Do you go there yourself? Or do you trust that he already knows? Drop your answer. Drop your city. Drop a yellow heart for Soleil who has been drawing the truth for 3 weeks and waited until her mama was ready to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let's continue. Zara did not panic. She was a woman who had learned the difference between the feeling of panic and the usefulness of it. Panic was information. What you did with the information was the whole thing. She stood in the kitchen for exactly 4 seconds. She looked at the drawing of the screen. She looked at the date. She looked at the clock on the wall. 10:43 a.m. The board meeting was at 2 p.m. She had 3 hours and 17 minutes. She picked up her phone. She went to her contacts. She found the number Min Yi had given her 6 months ago and told her was for emergencies. Not his regular number. A direct line. She had never used it. She looked at the number. She looked at the living room. Min Yi was still on the couch. She walked to the doorway. She looked at him. He looked up. Something in her expression made him put the phone down immediately. No performance. No confusion. Just the specific, complete attention of a man who had learned to read this woman accurately over months of Tuesday evenings and kitchen counters, and knowing when her back hurt. She said, "I need you to look at something." She showed him the sketchbook. She showed him the drawing of the screen. She showed him the woman in the doorway with the smile that only lived in one part of her face. She showed him all 6 drawings in order. He looked at each one. He did not rush. He did not say anything until he had looked at all of them completely. Then he looked at Soleil. Soleil was eating the rest of her pastry. She had done what she needed to do. She was done. How long ago? His voice was very controlled. The day you brought me to your office. Soleil broke off a piece of pastry 3 weeks ago. You drew this from memory. I draw everything from memory. She looked at him. I needed to understand it first before I showed Mama. Min Yi looked at the drawing of the screen again. He looked at the document details. The transfer authorization. His name. The beneficial ownership clause. The date. Today. His jaw was completely still. His expression had moved to the place it went when he was processing something that required the full capacity of his attention. Zara watched him. She had seen this expression twice before. Both times something significant had been decided in it. Min Yi. He looked at her. How? One word. How had this happened without him seeing it? He looked at the drawings. He looked at the woman Soleil had drawn 6 times. The smile that only lived in one part of the face. The documents in her hands. The eyes that were doing something different from the smile. He had looked at Una Park for 3 years. He had seen the smile. He had not examined what was behind it. He had trusted efficiency. He had trusted competence. He had not trusted wrong people. He had trusted the wrong things about the right people and assumed the whole picture was accurate. He stood up. Zara stood with him. She looked at him. What do you need? He looked at her. The specific look he gave her that had everything in it and said nothing out loud. She held it. He said, I need to make a call. She nodded. He picked up his phone. He dialed. Not Una. His corporate attorney. A man he had worked with for 4 years who was not Una's contact and had not been introduced to Una and therefore had not been in any of whatever Una had been building for 11 months. The call lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, he stood very still. Zara watched his face. He turned to her. She's been accessing the board documentation system with my credentials for 4 months. His voice was flat. Not hacking, not forced entry, using credentials I gave her for legitimate document management. Zara said nothing. She moved the board meeting 3 times. He looked at the window, because the transfer authorization required a specific quorum configuration that only appeared under the Friday scheduling. He looked at Zara. If I had walked into that meeting today and signed what was put in front of me. He stopped. The sentence did not need finishing. Zara looked at the sketchbook on the table. She looked at Soleil, who had finished her pastry and was now drawing again with the complete untroubled focus of someone who had done what was needed and was moving on. She said she drew it 3 weeks ago. Min Yi looked at this 5-year-old. Something moved through his expression. Something enormous and quiet. Soleil. She looked up. Why didn't you say something immediately? Soleil looked at him steadily. Because you weren't ready. He was quiet. The day I saw it, you were happy. You were showing me your office and you were proud. Her voice was completely even. If I had said something then, you would have needed to choose between what I was saying and what you believed about her, and you would have chosen what you believed. She looked at the drawing in front of her. I needed to wait until you had enough truth around you that one more piece of it would land. The apartment was absolutely quiet. Zara looked at her daughter. Min Yi looked at her daughter. Soleil looked at her drawing. She said, that's always how it works. He did not go to the office. He made 4 more calls from the apartment. Each one brief. Each one precise. By 12:30, the corporate attorney had flagged the transfer authorization to the board. By 1:15, 2 independent board members had reviewed the document and confirmed the beneficial ownership clause had been inserted without authorization into a version of the document that had been approved without it. By 1:45, Una Park walked into the Kang Industries building for a 2 p.m. board meeting and was met in the lobby. Not by security, by the corporate attorney and the chief financial officer, and 2 members of the board. She had prepared for many versions of this day. She had not prepared for this one. She had not prepared for the version where she walked in, and the people who were supposed to have signed what she needed had already been told what she had done. She had not prepared for the version where a 5-year-old on a kitchen floor had drawn her 6 times over 3 weeks and waited for exactly the right moment to show her mama. Her smile arrived as it always did. Perfectly. At exactly the right moment. It did not help. The investigation took 3 months. Una Park had been meticulous. Meticulous people leave meticulous evidence. The access logs. The document version histories. The credential usage records. The specific timestamps of 11 months of small, careful movements toward a transfer that would have handed beneficial ownership of Kang Industries' North American division to a shell company with Una's name buried 4 layers deep in its structure. She had been planning it since month 5 of her employment. She had been executing it since month 18. She had been 11 months into a 14-month timeline when a 5-year-old saw her screen for 3 minutes and understood something it had taken her 11 months to build. The investigation produced evidence. The evidence produced consequences. The consequences were quiet and complete in the way that things end when the person who built them was meticulous and therefore left no room for ambiguity. Min Yi came to the apartment on the Tuesday after it ended. Soleil was at the kitchen table with her sketchbook. She looked up when he came in. She looked at his face. She looked at her drawing. She went back to her drawing. He sat across from her. He watched her draw for a moment. You knew from the beginning, he said. Soleil did not look up. I knew something was wrong. It took me 3 weeks to know what. How? She looked up at him. I told you, her smile was only in one part of her face. Everything else she did was two things at once, what she showed and what she was doing. She picked up a green crayon. People who are two things at once have a specific quality, like they're always listening for something, even when they're talking, even when they're smiling. There's a part of them always somewhere else. He looked at his hands. I worked with her for 3 years. I know. I trusted her. I know, Soleil looked at him. That's why it worked for as long as it did. She needed you to trust her. She was very careful about being trustworthy in every way that wasn't the way that mattered. He sat with this. How do you see these things? She thought about it. I don't know, she looked at her drawing. I just look at people the way I look at drawings. You can tell when something is wrong with a drawing before you can explain what it is. Your eye catches it before your brain does. I think people work the same way. He was quiet for a long time. I was going to lose everything. I know. Not the company. He looked at Zara in the kitchen. Everything. Soleil followed his gaze. She looked at her mammo. She looked back at him. That's why I waited until the right moment. Her voice was completely even. The company was important, but that's not why I said don't let him go. He looked at her. She held his gaze. The company was the thing she was taking from you. Soleil put down her crayon. Mama is the thing worth keeping. The apartment was very quiet. Zara was at the counter. She had her back to them. Her shoulders were doing the specific thing they did when she had heard something and was managing her response to it. Min Yi looked at this 5-year-old. He had been looking at her for 7 months. He had understood from the first Tuesday on the stairwell that she was not ordinary. He had not understood the full extent of what that meant until this moment. Soleil. She looked at him. Thank you. She picked up her crayon. You're welcome. She went back to drawing. He asked Zara to marry him on a Wednesday. Not because Wednesday was significant. Because Wednesday was the ordinary day. Not a Tuesday anniversary or a Saturday gesture. Just a Wednesday evening in the apartment with soup on the stove and Soleil at the kitchen table and the city doing its usual thing outside the window. He did not prepare a speech. He sat at the counter beside her. He looked at the city through the kitchen window. He said, I want this to be the place I always come back to. She turned from the stove. She looked at him. He looked at her. Not the apartment, he held her gaze. This, you, Soleil, Wednesday evenings. She was very still. Wednesday evenings are not glamorous. I know. This is soup from a pot, not a restaurant. I know. You understand what you're asking. I have understood for several months. He looked at the counter. I was waiting until I was sure you did. She looked at him. She thought about the stairwell. The sad hands. The soup. The Tuesdays he had shown up. The pillow on the left side of the couch. The board meeting he had not walked into because a 5-year-old had drawn a woman 6 times and waited for the right moment. She thought about don't let him go. She looked at this man. She said yes. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The way she said everything that mattered. Quietly. Completely. From the kitchen table, Soleil said, without looking up from her drawing, I already drew it. Zara turned. Soleil held up the sketchbook. On the page were 3 figures. Standing at a kitchen window. A man, a woman, a small girl between them. And above them, in Soleil's specific handwriting. We were always going to be this. Zara looked at her daughter. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Not managing anything this time. Just feeling it. Min Yi looked at the drawing. He looked at this 5-year-old who had drawn the truth 6 weeks before it arrived. who had sat on a kitchen floor eating a pastry after saving everything he had, who had said the company was the thing she was taking, but Mama is the thing worth keeping, with the complete certainty of someone stating something obvious, who was now showing them a drawing of a family that she had drawn before he asked. He said, "When did you draw this?" Soleil turned the sketchbook back to her work. "A while ago." He said, "How long?" She looked up at him. She looked at her Mama. She looked at the drawing. She said, "The day you came for soup. The first Tuesday. 7 months ago. The stairwell. The sad hands. The soup." She had drawn it that day, before any of it had become anything, before he had come back, before the Tuesdays became a thing, before the pillow on the left side of the couch, before any of it. She had drawn it that day, because that was what she did. She drew what could be. She always had. She always would. And that is where this story ends. Not in a boardroom. Not in an investigation. Not with the meticulous evidence of 11 months of careful deception unraveling completely. But in a kitchen on a Wednesday evening, with soup on the stove, and a drawing on a kitchen table, and 3 people standing at a window, exactly as a 5-year-old had drawn them 7 months before they knew they were going to be there. Soleil had said, "Don't let him go," on a Saturday morning, with the complete certainty of someone who had already seen where it was going. She had been right. She was always right. She drew what she saw. She drew what she knew. She drew what could be. And sometimes, when the person looking at the drawing was ready to see it, what could be became what was. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your city and the time it is where you are right now in the comments. Drop a yellow heart for Soleil, who drew a family on the first day and kept it to herself for 7 months. Tell me, would you have waited 3 weeks the way she did, or would you have said something immediately? And tell me, when was the last time a child said something to you that you filed away and realized later they were right the whole time? This story is for every woman watching from the United States, from Canada, from the United Kingdom, from Australia, from Germany, from South Africa, from Ghana, from Nigeria, and everywhere else in this world who has ever trusted what a child saw when every adult around them was looking somewhere else. Hit subscribe. Hit like. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that children see everything. Because Soleil drew the truth on the first day. And she was right. She was always right. And Afro Korean love stories will keep bringing you more. Thank you for watching.